Hello and welcome to the reading from Agastya, Purpose of Life, from the Sacred Discourses of Agastya Valipadu. Today we'll continue the topic of thoughts. Basically, we were talking about thoughts because the question arose about black magic, and Appa Agastya is telling us the very basic thing about black magic, which arises from thoughts. So he's still continuing that process of talking about thoughts. And then we will go to what exactly is black magic and why it is performed, etc. So last week we were talking about how, as thoughts are deliberately allowed to leave the mind, a new space is created in which the person invites and accumulates higher knowledge. So the process of meditation helps this. As we have already spoken in the previous sessions, Appa Agastya always stresses on the fact that we need to know why we are meditating, what is the purpose for meditating, and to know that we need to understand why creation, who are we, why are we here, what is the purpose of life. And even in meditation, people think that, okay, they can just sit down and start meditating. No, it doesn't happen like that. Meditation is a whole process. It starts from yama and niyama, like the Patanjali Yoga Sutras that Appa's very clearly explained is the basis for all kinds of meditation all over the world, no matter what type of meditation, what religion, it doesn't matter. We have first understanding jnana, the yama and niyama, what to do and what not to do, to walk on the path of righteousness, to live like that. Then to understand how to sit, how to hold your hands, that's the mudras, how to withdraw your senses, how to breathe, and then the state of pratyahara, which is to let go of all thoughts, let go of all outer sensations. Then comes dharana, which is one pointed focus. Only then meditation starts. So Appa says, as we meditate, and many people don't reach that stage, even though they say they've sat and meditated for an hour or two, very few people are able to reach that state of meditation where thoughts are released, they're gone. You come to a stage where there is a stage of awareness, and that is what we are going to talk about today. So his space says, as thoughts are deliberately allowed to leave the mind, a new space is created in which the person invites and accumulates higher knowledge. This state is known as the fourth state of consciousness, or Turiya state. This is neither waking, sleeping, nor the dreaming state. Now, what is Appa talking about in terms of higher knowledge? It is a state where you become aware of your self. That self is not where there is complete understanding of the fact that there is no duality, that there is no God, Guru, you, there's no separateness between these things. You become aware of your inner nature. But most people are not able to get to this state. And even if they do, it's not possible to remain in this state when you're in this created world because of the cosmic laws. So many can go to that longer lens and remain in the state and come back, like the great masters, like Amritanandamayi, and then there is Anandamayima, then there is Ramakrishna Paramahansa, and all these great Ramana Maharishis, all these great ones were able to do that for longer periods of time. But in order to exist in this world, to do things that we are supposed to do, we still need to have some kind of link with the waking consciousness or the lower consciousness of the mind. Then Appa says, devoid of unnecessary thoughts, the mind enjoys immense joy. This period can be described as the Sat Chit Ananda state. I am giving you a lengthy introduction to the nature of various thoughts. So he's basically summing up this whole thing and saying, so when you arrive at that state in meditation, and we have talked about it before, where joy just comes up like a bubble, like a fountain, and there is no reason in that except it's pure bliss. And that state is where you reach the state of Turiya. And that is the whole idea of meditation, to arrive at that state, continue to arrive at the state, But that is not the end. The end comes, and most of us are not, who are in the manifested world today, are not yet ready to leave the world, because when we are ready to leave the world, we go beyond the state and we are no longer in this world. This body no longer is needed, and we discard this body and we return to original state. So beyond all this is another state. So that is something that only those who have understood and merged with the absolute arrive at. So we are all in the different levels going towards that stage. Now Appa continues with the idea of thought. In a normal person, when a thought arises to the surface, it gets connected to his chitta, which is the lower mind, or manas, which is the general thinking faculty. So what happens? So most of us, as soon as a thought comes, it's in the lower level, in the mind, mental level, in the waking consciousness. And what do? There are several types of persons with diverse types of vritti, or diverse types of mental states. Vedic scholars describe this as tamas, rajas, and sattvic gunas. Depending on the degree of dominance of any of these gunas, a person is labeled as possessing one of these three gunas or characteristics. Now, Appa is again laying a foundation. He's saying, as thoughts arise, it connects to the lower mind, where we are in the waking consciousness, where we are, still in the created world, in the idea of duality. But what happens depends also on the person. So the same thought, in how it may, or a same event, how it may affect a person depends on their guna, or the characteristics they have. So in the Vedas, we have three main gunas, or people, or the way we are is characterized by three main gunas. Gunas is, one is tamas, rajas, and sattvic. What are these? Tamas is basically a person who is very slovenly, who's not really interested in doing anything. Their attire is not so good all the time. They don't pay too much attention to doing anything more in their life other than existing, eating, living. They maybe, if they're forced to work, they will work, but they don't have any idea of anything higher than the fact that they're living here in this world and nothing more. Then there is the rajas, and those are the people, most of us belong to the rajas also. We are people who want to do things. We react. We have a lot of action in our life. Then there's the sattvic. They are the higher level of people who are more calm and deliberate, and they have reached a higher level, like many of the great gurus we see today. But he also says, depending on the degree of dominance of any of these three gunas, the person is labeled as possessing one of these three gunas or characteristics. So what does that mean? That means all of us have all these three gunas. We have the tamasic, sattvic, and the rajasic states, but they are at different degrees. Sometimes one of these come, surface, and we express that our life or character in that way. However, most of us are defined by that guna or that kind of character, which is the strongest in us. So it would be best to be either having a sattvic would be the greatest, and rajasic. Having a higher dominance of sattvic or rajasic is better than ever having a tamasic or slovenly kind of a characteristic. So Appa says, so what happens when the thought comes? And depending on the type of person, then it affects them. So let us see, he gives an example. So when a thought arises, it is necessary to understand its influence on the nature of the person. For example, he gives a very simple example. When a snake is encountered, a person with tamoguna will stand rooted in the spot in shock. There is no action from him because fear makes him completely rooted to the spot. A person with rajoguna either kills it or dares to pick it up. So a person who's more action oriented, has courage, will do something about it. A person with sattvic guna looks at the snake as part of creation, remains unperturbed, and just walks away. So he's just giving a very simple example of how people react to situations in the same way we react. So if somebody scolds us, a person with a tamasic guna, will get angry, but may not express it, and they keep the anger and remain. A person with rajoguna gets angry, responds, reacts. But a person who has sattvic guna understands it, lets it go, understands that it really doesn't matter what other person is saying to him because he knows what he is. So every situation in life is like that. When you start looking at yourself each day, how you react to things, you can understand what kind of the guna or characteristic you're expressing depending on each situation. So most of us are in the rajasic guna, or unless we have reached a stage where we have complete understanding of what this life is all about. And that is where great scriptures like Vadipadu come into focus, because it teaches us how to get away or distance ourselves from all this through knowledge. Not just saying like, hey, you shouldn't do this, this is wrong. It is about why you shouldn't do something wrong. Once you understand that, once you understand why somebody is doing something to you and what it all means, what is karma, how you brought this onto yourself, then you begin to change the way you react to things. So we're talking about how thought affects action in all of our lives. If we know thoughts are constantly coming, and how do thoughts arise? Most of the time, waking consciousness, it arises because we see something. That is the whole idea of advertisement. They are appealing to your senses, the most powerful senses, which is your eyes. The moment you see something which is very tasty, you want to eat it. And that is what is happening. In the same way, everything that we see in our life, everything we experience, everything that we allow through the sense telephones is affecting us. And as the thought affects us, if you do not allow it to continue, if you let it go, then it doesn't really affect you. But if you continue to see the same thing over and over again, if you start dwelling on it, if you start thinking about it, then it converts to action. And that is how even interaction between two people changes from person to person. Some person says something to you, you let it go with the sattvic guna because you've understood that, okay, because of the nature of the person, he's saying that, but you know what you have done, it is okay. Or you understand that maybe in one of your previous lives, you had to undergo this particular karma. So you're just experiencing that karma through this person, you let it go. But if you're a rajasic person, then you're going to react and you're going to create more karma. So everything that is happening in our life, everything, what we are seeing, that is why it becomes important to allow only good things into what we experience in life as much as possible. If it's in your control, I have an interesting thing to say, hang up the telephone. So if you're talking to somebody and somebody says something that is uncomfortable for you, say something nice and make an excuse, hang up the phone. In the same way, hang up your sense telephone when something is happening that is causing trouble in your mind. Do not let these things come in. And in the current situation where, take an example of the Instagram, right? There's a bombardment of things coming to you. You go through Instagram, it is like one after another, there's a reel, right? There are different things coming. So it's like a mental confusion because you were seeing a child, then you're seeing something bad, then you're seeing the news, then you're seeing fake news. So all this creates mental confusion. So for a spiritual person, it's very important to begin to understand what you're seeing, how it's affecting you. Not saying just directly stop doing all this. It is not possible. We live in a world where we still have to watch the news, we still have to interact with people. But what yourself, how you react to things, because what you're allowing into your mind through your sense telephones, it's converting to thoughts, converting into action. So be aware daily. So spirituality is not about sitting and meditating for an hour. Spirituality is a way of life, and that is what Valipadu is all about. That's what all these lectures that Agastya has given is all about. So let us continue. So the expression may be pleasant or unpleasant, depending on the effect they produce on another person. So how we express after a thought comes to us is either pleasant or unpleasant, depending on what kind of effect it produces on another person. That is where karma comes in. For karma is usually in relation to another. So when you are doing something, how does that person feel? Are you saying something that is hurting that person? Then stop. You don't need to do it. It is not God has not given you the responsibility of judging others. God has not given us the responsibility of hurting others or correcting others or being a policeman. We don't have to be. There's God for that. And each person has their own life. And what they are doing and what they are learning through their life is what they need to learn, what that soul needs to learn. I used to be judgmental. I used to be judgmental of people who were more tamasic in nature until I heard what Dolores said. She said, you don't know what that person has gone through. Maybe the person has gone through a lot of things in the previous life that they are in a stage of life where they've come just to kind of recover from it, not to add more action and karma by acting. See, most tamasic persons, they're so slovenly or so lazy, they don't really react too much. So when they're not reacting, when they're not doing anything, they're not accumulating karma. But that doesn't mean that we have to be like that, because that is one of the very lowest natures. But we can learn something from this. That is, we cannot be judgmental. Every person has a reason why they are here. Every person has a purpose. Every person has to experience what they need to experience. So we need to stop judging people. So what we do, but what we can do is what we do in terms of another person and how it reacts, how it makes them react, what effect it has on them. We can stop that so that we do not accumulate further karma. Then he says, for example, when love is expressed between a mother and child or spouses, it is pleasant. Yes, we all know that when love is expressed, it doesn't matter. As long as it is of the correct nature, then it's always pleasant. On the other hand, a bad thought, such as a hatred or jealousy, arising in a rajas state, shows itself in the form of anger. Here is very clear. He's talking about what happens. So how many times have all of us felt angry? So that is where we are talking about the dominance of the guna at that particular event. Depending on the character of the person, we all have all the three gunas. But when we start expressing it in anger, that is when we are letting our rajasic guna or the acting part of it come out. So some people hide this emotion for a long time. And he also says there are a lot of people who hide this emotion for a long time. We talked about it. Even tamasic, a lot of people, accumulate this anger within them all the time because they're not expressing it. They don't want to express it for whatever reason. What happens? Not finding a release, these thoughts accumulate in the body and affect vital parts such as the heart, kidney, or lungs. So here, Appa is bringing a clear connection between thought and disease. So everything, if you understand, is energy. So even the way we think, the way we react, all this has some connection to the things that we suffer from. So remember, thought is not just thought. Thought converts to action. thought can affect another, create karma, and thought can also affect you and create disease in you. So that is why a wholesome life is important for a spiritual person. How you live, with whom you interact, how you interact, what you do each day, everything is important. That is why organs in people who hide their feelings are affected. That is why it is better to allow such negative thoughts to surface instead of suppressing them. Appa says, don't allow negative thoughts to, to accumulate. Let them out. But how do we express them? Not by anger. That's again negative. So understand that thoughts arise based on experience and are expressed in diverse ways depending on the nature of the person. So he goes on to say that understand this. But how do we then express negative emotions? Like we talked about in the last session, talk to somebody. Talk to somebody who is understanding, who's able to guide you, who can actually put out that flame of anger in you. Don't talk to somebody who can add fuel to the anger. In India or in some of the countries like where we have still a lot of interaction between people, that is why we don't have too much mental illness, because we have family to talk to, we have friends to talk to, we have people who we can go and talk to and let out all these things. In Western countries where we are more isolated, where we are more independent, where we are more private, we have more mental issues. You know why? Because we have no outlet. We cannot express. And what do? We finally go pay a lot of money to consultants and psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors and sit there and talk to them. So as you experience things, think of what kind of thoughts you're allowing. Think of how it's affecting you. Think of what needs to be expressed in what way, when, how, where, and then continue your life. So Appa says, so I'm going to repeat this again. So understand that thoughts arise based on experience and are expressed in diverse ways depending on the nature of the person. The force of thought that is expressed results in action. Negative actions harm others, positive actions please others. So again, the force of the thought. As we talked about, thought comes, what you add to it, how many times you repeat the thought, how much you mull over a thought. All these are factors that result in the action. It's best to come to a stage where you do not act negatively. So let us try to keep our actions very positive. Okay. Now he comes to witchcraft. Coming to your question on witchcraft, it is once again an expression of thoughts. So why did Appa talk about thoughts all over here? He's talking about expression. What is witchcraft? It's not just about, taking something and doing something. It comes from thought. So instead of using thoughts to help others, wicked people use their thoughts to harm others. This is witchcraft. So he's continuing to explain that. Some individuals are able to give life to these destructive thoughts. They can also use occult practices that include chanting, meditation, geometric figures, which are yantras, and spells, which is tantras. It is called witchcraft because the craft is a technique and witch stands for wicked. So how does black magic happen? It happens because somebody has the power to harness their thoughts and use it in a negative way. All of us are constantly influencing somebody else through our thoughts. So if you are thinking negatively and then you are, that thought is directed towards a particular person, that person is already feeling the effects of your thoughts. That is why it becomes so important not to have negative thoughts of people. If you have any problem with anybody, try to understand them. Bring jnana or wisdom in and let those negative thoughts out. Become selfish in spirituality, in that don't worry about what others are doing, what they're doing to you. Be careful about what you are doing. That's all that matters. Become more understanding, become more able to understand what others are going through. You don't know what they've gone through in their previous lives. So let it all go. So what happens is, when these thoughts, some people actually start using these destructive thoughts, and they're actually able to use other things like tantras and yantras and chanting and all these things. They give power to that object or something and direct it towards another person. That is what witchcraft is all about. That's what black magic is all about. So now the question of why and how is black magic performed, says Abba. First, let us start with the question why. For some, it is a means to gain materials or money. For others, it is an irresistible addiction of the mind. They become uncomfortable without practicing it. This is very important. So why does this happen? So black magicians, why do they use it? Because they gain material or money from somebody else. There are a lot of individuals who go to purposely go to a black magician and pay them money so that they can create harm on another person. Now, let us look at the question of, is the person who's the black magician wrong, or the person who's giving him the money wrong? Both are wrong. Both will have the same effect of the karma that occurs because of the effect that of the black magic on the victim. So for that, that is what is happening, where people are going to people who do voodoo or black magic. But then he also says there are some who do it because it becomes irresistible. So the strongest addiction is the addiction of the mind, because you understand the power of the mind and you're using it to harm others, because you're controlling somebody, controlling another person's will. The greatest karma that you can incur, because every person has come to this world to understand, experience, and learn. And when you try to prevent them from doing the very thing that they come here for, you are going against the cosmic law. That is why in the 7 lower levels of consciousness, or places or lokas that we call in India, the lowest is for people who are black magicians. And we have people in normal sense who are not black magicians, who like to control others, who like to control others by the way they talk, the way they treat them, whether it's the children, the spouses, or the people they come in contact with. They are almost at that level. They're using the power of their mind, and they're using the power of the social status or whatever to control another's will, and that is wrong. We cannot do that. There's a difference. We understand the difference between what a parent does in terms of helping and guiding a child, than how a grown man, a grown adult does this to another grown person. So remember, these are all different levels of karma. And so we come back to, so the next thing is, the question is how, right? So Appa says various techniques are involved. In all the cases, the effect is determined by the strength and intensity of the thought produced by the wicked person. The main culprit is actually the person who uses or employs the wicked person. So like we talked about, not only is the black magician wrong, but the main culprit is the person who uses such a person. Such people want to gain something by hurting others. The nature of harm could involve the body, the mind, or behavior. In higher intensity, it can also destroy a family and its future. Ultimately, the result of bad karma incurred by the person who employs a black magician will affect both of them. So that is why we as spiritual aspirants must stay away from anything that is negative, which is of the darker acts. If you think you come across somebody who's like that, stay away from them. It's not worth associating with such people. You cannot change them. You do not have the power to change them unless you are realized God or Guru. It's impossible. It's only going to affect you. So be careful. And then we'll finish with the next few sentences. So, what is the effect on the person on whom it is aimed? Everything has its limitations. The effects last for a certain duration of time, he says. So it all depends on the intensity of the person or the strength of the black magician and the things they've used. And yes, chanting, everything has power. We as spiritual aspirants know that everything in this world has energy. Energy can be harnessed. And so it all depends on the power of the strength of the whole technique and the person who's aiming it and the thought. The thought is the main thing because that is what gives it power, right? But there's another thing. How does it affect the person against whom it has been directed? Now, we barely have a few minutes, so I'm going to stop with that and we will talk about it in the next session. But before we go, Brother Ramachandran, do you have anything to say about how thoughts affect, the body?
See that thoughts, one is anger or any negative emotions. That thought there is it against a person. There is a cord is formed in his Manipura chakra or solar plexus. See, this will affect that person, you know. So any thought and all negative thoughts, there is a cord is formed. So this can be removed by one way of forgiveness, permission. And we have got another is prana violating healing wand. This wand which I am having, this has got the power of emitting prana energy. And when you show it in the, when you give the command to the wand to remove from that this thing, you will find that it is removing that. For example, for this, these gurus, many gurus will be there, like Brahma Kumari, and many people will be captured by these gurus, so-called gurus. So their Ajna chakra will be affected. So if you do this, then it will be, they will remove, slowly go away.
See, so that's a very important
because soul doesn't want that it should be kept by these gurus. It should be free.
Yes.
Which is
So,
in the Ajna chakra.
As I said, we are running short of time, but that's a very important topic. So when we come back next week, we will talk about that too, about how we are linking us with another person through these thoughts. Very beautiful example, and how to remove that is very important. So we will definitely talk about it next week. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll continue.